Uh, it's not anywhere on my profile, but I love The Lord of the Rings, so that's wonderful. I hope you all had a good lunch. I'm going to ease us into the afternoon a little bit by kicking us off with a short little story. About 9 months ago, I was at a crossroads of sorts. My team had just started rebuilding an application that I worked on, and because I had been the senior developer or the lead developer on the last version of the project, I was the lead on the new version as well. We had decided to work with the tech stack that we had already built a few applications in our team with, and that seemed like a really good idea at the time. Well, a few months into the project, we realized that wasn't actually such a great idea. We were running into lots of issues. It was hard to test a lot of our code. We didn't have common patterns for some of the core architecture we needed to build, and there wasn't a large community for us to draw on for support and fixing common problems that we were encountering. And so we had a decision to make. Do we fight this somewhat familiar tech stack to keep using it, or do we instead embrace something new and change directions? Well, after a little bit of deliberation, you might be able to guess, we decided to embrace something new. A newer developer on our team recommended that we try React with Redux and TypeScript. They thought that it would be a good fit for the problems that we were facing. And so we decided to take a risk on it. But there was only one problem with this approach. I didn't know React, or Redux, or TypeScript, really. Me, the lead developer for the project. I felt a lot like that meme of a dog sitting at a computer. I didn't know what I was doing, and yet everyone was kind of relying on me. Fast forward 9 months, however, and things have gone surprisingly well. We're getting positive feedback for the app from our initial users. Development has gone more or less smoothly and on time, which is practically unheard of. And perhaps most importantly for this conference, I now actually know React, and I enjoy using it. And as I reflected on this journey over the last few months, I was wondering, what was it that made us successful? There had to be some things that are important for our success. And so that's what I want to share with you today. Some of the things that were a part of our team's culture that helped us learn this new technology stack and be successful with it. And so I want to talk to you today about how to teach an old developer, like myself, new technology, as seen through my experience over the last 9 months. Together, we're going to learn what you can do to create a team culture where learning is not just encouraged, but celebrated, and hopefully make yourselves successful at it. So, my name is Trent Willis, as has been mentioned. You can find me on Twitter at Trent M. Willis. You can expect a good number of dog photos in this presentation. And if you look at me, you might think to yourself, he doesn't look like he's that old. Why is he giving this talk? And to that, I would say, one, thank you for the compliment, but two, I don't mean old as in age. When I say old, I mean it in the same sense of that saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Old is simply someone that has some habits that they're ingrained in, and they're not easily going to give those up or change their behaviors. For developers, I find that this often looks like someone that is comfortable with a specific tech stack or a certain framework, has been working primarily in that tech stack for a while, and as a result, they're kind of just stuck in their habits. They don't want to change very easily. In other words, an old dev is a dev that is solidly in their comfort zone and has been for a while. And the unfortunate reality is that this sort of state can kind of bias you towards not learning things. And so when presented with options that might solve problems you're facing, like I was with a new tech stack, it's easy for us to bias against them. Say that, oh, we don't really need that. We can just work with what we have. And there are some valid reasons why that's the case, though. Right? There are some good reasons for staying where you're comfortable. If you're starting a new project, you can make quicker progress at the start of your project, as we had hoped to do in our case. You could foresee possible pitfalls or issues that you might run into. Obviously not 100% of the time, though, as we experienced. And you might already have an existing tool base or knowledge base built up within your team, or maybe even your entire company. And that provides a lot of value. I mention all these points because I want to make it clear that the comfort zone is not inherently a bad thing. I actually think it's really wonderful and really important for developers to feel comfortable in their work environment and with the technology that they're using. I like it when my coworkers can tell me that, hey, they feel really productive and comfortable and like they're performing well, and not that they feel like imposters, which is what we often hear at conferences, right? By a quick show of hands, actually, how many of you would say that you are more productive when you're working with technology you're comfortable with? Okay, virtually all of you. Those of you that didn't raise your hand, I'd be very curious to talk to you. So this talk is not to say that you must leave your comfort zone. In fact, quite the opposite. I want everyone to be comfortable with the technology that they use. But you shouldn't be scared to do so when it makes sense. The comfort zone is a bad thing when you're staying there because of reasons like not trusting others' experiences. Like if I had not trusted that newer dev on my team telling me that, hey, React could probably solve the problems we're encountering. Or maybe you're afraid to fail in front of your team. You're afraid that you can't admit that you don't know something, that you have to have all of the answers. Or maybe in a similar vein, you actually like having all the answers. You want to remain the resident expert, the one that everyone looks up to. If you're staying where you're comfortable because of these reasons, I think your culture has some failings in it. Right, the comfort zone is bad when it doesn't celebrate people learning, people growing. In other words, it becomes bad when it's kind of all focused on you and what's best for you and not what's best for your team or for your company. All those examples that I just gave are basically indicative that you don't like learning or celebrating other people's growth. Not trusting others' experiences says that I don't think that there's anything I can learn from you. Being afraid to fail in front of your team says that, hey, I have to be perfect. My team has no room for me to be weak. And wanting to remain the resident expert says, I don't really like it when other people get celebrated. I want everyone to celebrate me and my accomplishments. All these things leads towards us not having the full range of possibilities for the problems that we're solving. It limits our possible solutions. It makes it hard for us to work together sometimes and leads towards teams that don't have diversity of thought. All of those are pretty bad. So what can we do to create a culture that does celebrate learning, that doesn't have those negative traits? Well, in my experience, you answer that question by answering a related question is, why do we learn anything? What are our motivations? Well, broadly, we know that there are lots of different types of motivations, but they kind of fall into two buckets. The first type of motivation is known as extrinsic motivation, or external things. These are rewards that come externally to your own internal drive. Things like money, or fame, or success. Things that you're striving for. Sometimes we call these incentives. For me, in my project, it was because we had decided to adopt this new technology, so I needed to learn it in order to continue doing my job effectively and not get fired. But for others, it might be maybe you want a new job and you need new skills. Or maybe you're taking on a new project and it works in a different domain, and so you need to come up to speed on that. There's a wide variety of these. The other type of motivation is one that I also experienced in my project, though, and that is intrinsic or internal motivation. I wanted to learn React and TypeScript. I had interest in them. Redux, not as much. And so this, I think, is often what people mean when they talk about passionate developers, right? People that have this high level of intrinsic motivation. They want to do something because it's interesting to them. They enjoy it. They find it fascinating. Now, it's easy to hear these distinctions and immediately think to yourself, well, intrinsic motivation obviously has to be the clear winner, right? It's obviously better than extrinsic motivation. But that's not always the case. In fact, one type of motivation does not necessarily produce better results than the others. I have worked with some developers that were really passionate, but because of that passion and not having a team culture that helped them balance it, they just wound up burning out and destroying their mental health. Some of them have even left the tech industry. And that's not a good result for anyone. On the other hand, I've worked with some developers that really only treated programming as a job. They did it at work, and that was about it. But they were phenomenal developers. They could turn out features and solve complex problems like it was a piece of cake. But that said, research has shown that intrinsic motivation is more likely to produce better results. And I think we all understand this innately, right? If we want to do something, we're more likely to be good at it and successful because we're driven. Now, in my story, though, we run into an interesting scenario, right? I wanted to learn React, and now I needed to learn React. We see both types of motivation. Now, interestingly, having both of these can actually decrease your intrinsic motivation in a weird phenomenon known as the over-justification effect, which essentially means that you're going to feel less motivated to do something if someone offers you an external reason to do it. No one's 100% sure why this happens, but a lot of people believe it's because an activity you might have found enjoyable on its own now might feel like you're only doing it because of this external reward. Why does any of this matter? Why am I talking about motivation at a tech conference? Well, it's because understanding why we're learning stuff is actually going to let us create environments where success is more likely, where we're going to be more effective. And I don't think we talk about this very often. I've never heard anyone at any of the companies I've worked at talk about this. We often just assume that if an engineer needs to learn something new, they're going to learn it, whether or not they're happy to or because they feel obligated to. But I've worked in places where folks were constantly bombarded by a lot of change and churn and JavaScript fatigue, and they didn't necessarily want to learn these new things. They weren't interested and engaged, and what wound up happening is they weren't as productive, and a lot of them eventually left. And so the good news here is that motivations can change, unlike your data in a Redux store. Some studies have found that if you're not interested in something to begin with, if you're not intrinsically motivated, that can change. As you work on it, if the right feedback is given to you and the right feelings are evoked, you can actually wind up going from extrinsically motivated to intrinsically motivated, which is a really good thing and really powerful. But you have to be wary because the opposite can also happen, which I think we've probably all encountered before, and is why I think that this topic is important. We want to avoid our teammates that are passionate developers from burning out or getting discouraged. But we also want those that may not necessarily be interested in a technology or maybe aren't super thrilled with the project they're working on. We want them to become interested and engaged and feel like they're doing something great with their time. In other words, when I say celebrate learning, I really just mean build a culture that fosters positive and supportive motivations for learning, and honestly for everything else that you do. This is an important part of a healthy team, in my opinion. So if we go back to that question, how do we create a culture that celebrates learning? I would suggest we start by being honest, right? Be honest about the knowledge that you have. In other words, admit when you don't know something. In the past, I've worked on teams where there were some developers that simply never admitted if they didn't know something, or never admitted if they had been wrong about something. And that was not great. Have you ever worked with someone like that? If so, how did it make you feel? For me, it felt like I was not able to admit when I didn't know something. And therefore, I lost a lot of time learning things on my own when I could have learned them more quickly and more effectively from my teammates. On the other hand, I've also worked on teams where people were quick to say, hey, I'm not sure what the answer is, but we can sit down together and figure it out. And what that did is it built really good and strong relationships. It showed that learning is an important part of our team's culture, and it says that your ability to learn something is more important as part of this team than it is that you already know it. And if you're a senior developer, I think that this is really empowering to the junior developers around you, because all of a sudden, senior developers aren't these wizards with infinite knowledge, and instead, they're just like everyone else, right? We don't know everything. We forget stuff. I Google things all the time. And perhaps most importantly, we still have a lot to learn. What should set senior developers apart, though, and I think did in my case, is that we should have a base of experiences and past things that we've learned that help us learn and relearn things much faster. And that said, we should also know a good amount of things as well. And so this type of culture gives you confidence when you venture into new technologies, because you know your team is going to have your back. In a similar vein, though, for those of us that are further along in our career, we need to build empathy about the learning process when you're starting from a lower point with less experience. Remind yourself, what was it like when you were a beginner or a junior developer, right? How do you do this? Well, you can't unlearn something, obviously. And so I think that there are two approaches that you can take here. And the first one is what I would recommend, and that is simply listen to those learning something for the first time. If someone on your team is learning something that you already know, and they come to you and give you some sort of feedback about it, listen to what they're actually telling you. Right? If someone is telling you that something is hard, don't tell them, oh, you're just not thinking about it right, or oh, that's obviously you're just doing it wrong. Understand what they're telling you and find ways to make it easier for them. Improve the experience that they're having. I think it's really easy for us to forget how hard it was at the beginning. Doing this is going to show them that not only you want them to learn the material, but that you actually want it to be a good experience, that their feedback is meaningful and valuable. And this can actually make a chore for someone, like learning something, into something that they actually enjoy doing, because it might feel like they're giving back to the team, creating a better experience for those that come later. I've experienced this firsthand on some of the teams that I've been on. So listen and act on the feedback that you get from those that are going through that learning process. The second approach that I would recommend is try learning something new that's complex. For instance, last year, in addition to learning React, which is relatively complex, I also tried to learn how to play the guitar. And I think I've been relatively successful, but the first few months of it were really hard. My fingers didn't know what to do, the muscle memory wasn't there, and I struggled pretty much every step of the way. But every time I learned something new, mastered a new chord, or learned a new technique, it was really exciting. And it reminded me that these long journeys to learn hard skills, like programming, is a lot like climbing a mountain, right? Learning a new technology is like climbing a mountain. Sometimes it's going to be hard, and it's going to feel like you're going uphill and everything is going wrong. Other times it'll be super easy and you get a nice downward slope, or you're trudging along in a nice valley. And then other times you're going to feel like you got completely lost and you're like, did I even learn the right material? But once you reach that summit, it's a wonderful feeling, right? We all like it when we can share with others the awesome things that we've learned. But it's easy for us to forget how we got there. So go through that experience again, remind yourself what it was like, because it is not easy. Once you have that honesty and that empathy as part of your team's culture, a part of the way you relate to your teammates, I think it's really important then to then actually actively build up others, give them chances to learn and to teach you. The easiest way to do this is encourage your teammates to explore things when opportunities present themselves in your work. And the project that I've been working on a few months ago, maybe a few weeks ago, I had a teammate come to me and say, hey, I think WebAssembly would be a really great way to solve this problem we've been facing. I could have shut him down and been like, no, I don't think so. I don't think WebAssembly is ready for us to work it into our app. But instead, it seemed to make somewhat sense on a paper, and so we decided to build a prototype. We took a couple days and fleshed it out. And you know what? It wound up not working out. But we learned a lot in the process. And what we learned about WebAssembly and about our build tools and so forth, we were then able to bring towards other problems later on. I think far too often, we stifle people's chances to learn and opportunities to really explore new topics just because we're afraid they're not going to work out and we're going to lose a little bit of time. And I think that's really unfortunate. They're not all going to work out, but those that do are going to be tremendous and are going to open up completely new ways for you to solve problems in the future. And that's really important for an industry such as ours, where we're always looking for the next best thing. So encourage people to explore their interests. On a somewhat different note, if someone is able to teach you something, let them do that. Play to the strengths and knowledge of your teammates that they already have. In the project we've been working on, as I mentioned, one of my coworkers already had experience with the tech stack that we had chosen. And so I let them set up a lot of the initial parts of the repo. They took the lead, and the result has been that they've been able to teach me a lot about React and TypeScript and idioms and patterns related to it, as well as they now feel a greater sense of ownership in the project. I could have insisted that I do all the heavy lifting and all the initial setup and slowed us way down because I would have had to learn everything. Instead, I was able to step back, and they got to play a bigger role. It's important, though, that when things like this happen, when you let people take the lead, make sure you recognize them. Don't let good contributions of others go unnoticed. And this is particularly important if that person is someone that would otherwise not get recognized in your work. Tell your manager, tell your coworkers, tell everyone. Which brings me to the final point of this section, which is that sometimes you need to actually celebrate the work that you've done and the things that you've learned. If I were to ask you all, how does your team celebrate people learning new stuff? I would imagine a lot of you wouldn't have a super solid answer. I know I haven't in many of the jobs that I've held. In fact, the best example I have of this comes from a couple jobs ago when I worked at a company called Groove Shark. Every week, the company held a meeting called Kudos, where everyone gathered around and we gave shout-outs to people. It didn't have to be for anything big. It could be, hey, Joe unblocked me by writing some documentation that was missing. And that would be fine. So you got that shout-out, but you also got a Kudos candy bar along with it. This is this really small token of gratitude. It wasn't guaranteed, but it was really wonderful when you got it. Unfortunately, they don't make these candy bars anymore. But there are still similar things that you can do, just small ways to show people that you appreciate them. These small acts of praise can really make it so that your teammates feel a lot more appreciated. And that can, in turn, make them feel more engaged with their work, which, as we talked about, can help you feel more successful. But you have to be wary of that over-justification effect I mentioned earlier. You can't make it so that people feel motivated to do their work because they think they might get a candy bar or some other reward at the end of it. It has to just be a natural thing, an authentic thing that happens as part of your team's culture. So, we've talked about why learning is important, how to build a team culture that really reflects that. But even if all that's in place, learning some stuff is just going to be hard, no matter what. Software engineering is difficult. And as much as we try to make it easy, it's still going to be a struggle sometimes. So how can we make learning for ourselves more effective? How do we set ourselves up for success? If you zoned out, which some of you might have, that's okay, tune back in, because we're going to get a little more practical in the last few minutes of this talk. Start, every time you have something new to learn, start by researching the scope of what you need to learn. I have seen far too many people be like, okay, I need to learn X, such as I need to learn Redux. Let me just go dive right into the first getting started guide, and that'll be it. Instead, I think you should really take a step back and figure out what all you need to learn first. My team, for instance, when embarking on this new project, sat down, we talked about what we're going to use for testing, what common patterns are we going to apply, are we going to use hooks, how are we going to build our app, and so forth. After that meeting, I was able to go sit down, look at all the documentation in the different sections, how they broke it down, and kind of figured out what steps I would take to learn all of this. And then I could build up that knowledge in little, well-defined increments. This is really important to help us avoid feeling overwhelmed or potentially lost, right? It makes it easier for us to focus our efforts. Instead of being like, this week I guess I'll learn React, what does that really mean? At what point have you learned React? And instead, I could be like, today I'm going to figure out how do I define a React component and how do I pass props between them? And that's a much more tangible goal. And it also makes it easier for those that have experience to give you help, because you can be like, instead of being like, I don't really get Redux, you can instead be like, I don't understand how to implement a reducer. That's a lot more tangible and a lot more effective. And in a similar vein, this lets you then pick your projects or tickets or issues, whatever you call them, purposefully, so that you can learn a new skill with each of them. For instance, while ramping up for this project, I let my coworker tackle a lot of the more complex features early on. And instead, I focused on implementing a small component here, maybe a new reducer or a new piece of our data store over there. And before long, I was able to actually combine all those concepts that I learned together into more complex features. And I was very intentional about the issues that I was tackling. And the result was that I didn't feel pressure or rushed to learn all this stuff. And it gave someone else on my team a chance to really shine. And that benefited both of us greatly in the long run. But sometimes, no matter how purposeful and intentful you are with your planning, you're going to feel overwhelmed. It just happens. So take breaks. I don't think I hear people talk about this that often. If you're feeling frustrated with your work, take a break. If you're feeling kind of bored or unmotivated, take another little break. Let yourself recharge and then come back with fresh eyes. Research has shown that taking breaks, particularly while learning, helps your brain consolidate information and retain it better. And this isn't like take one break a day or every couple of days. It's actually more like take breaks every hour to hour and a half. That's what they say is most effective for creative endeavors like building software. Plus, Breaks are going to help you improve your mental, physical, and maybe even emotional health. You can get out from behind your desk from every now and then. As well as they give you a chance to restore your motivation, which, as we talked about earlier, is kind of important. I think the power of rest is tragically underestimated in our field, right? We don't necessarily do physically demanding work, but the work we do can be very mentally exhausting, and I don't think we often put enough thought into how we recover from that. So take breaks. Give your mind a rest every now and then. And on a similar note, get your sleep at night. Seriously. Some studies have shown that not getting enough sleep at night can actually reduce your ability to learn by as much as 90%, which means you might be as 1/10 as effective as you could be in your job. And that's just not good. Sleeping is a really major and important time for our brains to prepare for learning the next day. And in fact, it lets us create associations and new memories about things that happened while we were awake. That's why a lot of devs can report being stuck on a problem, but then they go to sleep and wake up and they magically have a solution, because your brain is doing things that it otherwise would not have. So get your sleep. Seriously, it's like magic. I love it. And finally, be gentle on yourself. Right? The journey is going to be different for each thing you learn. Sometimes it's going to be really hard. Sometimes it's going to be really easy, like when I learned React. Sometimes it'll be a slog the entire time, like me trying to figure out Redux with TypeScript. The types made no sense to me. All the tips I just gave are meant to set yourself up for success. They're not going to be perfect, but they are going to let you have a healthier balance with your work life. And so that brings us to the end of this talk. Right, we talked about how the comfort zone is not inherently a bad thing, but it can become bad when it starts biasing us against good solutions, against growing. We learned that we can combat that by fostering positive motivations for learning and growing, by being honest with ourselves and our teammates about our limits, showing empathy for others that are going through that process, and building up others when they have chances to learn. And then I shared a few tips on how you can make learning for yourself more effective. Most importantly, by just making purposeful plans and taking care of yourself. So my closing question to you all today is, what are you going to take away from this talk? I hope that you're inspired to make some small changes or maybe double down on something that your team is already doing effectively. And if you're not sure where to start, I would just recommend starting by being honest, like I mentioned earlier. Let your teammates know what your limitations are so that you can work together. Come up with solutions that you otherwise would not have on your own. Let's stop all the gatekeeping that we see all over the place about, oh, I can't believe you don't know this already. And instead build a culture that celebrates it when people have a chance to learn something new. Start by being a developer that celebrates learning, whether it's for yourself or for someone else. Thank you.